Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Greetings and welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? This show, when I initially set it up, was more intended to be a listener's stories, personal encounters type of show. I really need to get the name of those shows straight. I have a new intro I'm going to have just for those shows, and hopefully one for the roundtables as well. But yeah, so that was my intent going in. But talking to Rachel, as you'll see, turned more into an actual full-out show. Rather than just talking about her experiences, we discuss Kundalini and energy and stuff we don't talk about a lot on this show. She talks about meditation and how it has helped her and helped other people she knows, and kind of just the way she views all this stuff. So attached in the show notes or below on YouTube, you'll find links to all of her stuff if you're interested in finding out more. So here we go. This is my conversation with Rachel Fox. All right, and I am speaking with Rachel Fox, and you're based out on the West Coast, right?
Yes, sir. I am here in Los Angeles.
And you had contacted me after one of my shows. I don't know which one it was now. It was a while back after talking about Kundalini, and you realized that that was something you were also experiencing.
Yeah, your experience really felt a lot like mine. And when I sent you a message, you personally replying, it felt like a kindred spirit. So I appreciated the information that you had. And, I've taken the information and run with it.
Nice. Now, when did your experiences start?
So I've always had these experiences, sort of looking back on it. You're not a 9-year-old interested in Wicca because you don't have an occult sensibility. I come from a family that, like both my parents are West Point graduates, and my dad's father, my grandfather, is a 2-star general. He was most notably in charge of the Star Wars project. So nuclear missile defense was something at the dinner table, not necessarily magic. But I had a super intense interest in, and I'm sure a lot of your guests are in this boat, but in literature at a very early age, and just investigation by book, and the idea that no adult could confine what I could know if I could get my hands on a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad is actually himself a person who is a quantitative marketing professor, but could have been a philosophy professor. And so I picked his library, starting at about 7. So that was the basis for a lot of my investigation was, reading people like Freud and Jung and, Descartes and just, even Shakespeare and the Iliad and the Odyssey. And, you get to sort of sense the archetypical is true in a really fundamental sense. And what is that? Where does that lead?
Okay. So you had talked about having morbid Kundalini.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when did did you know what was happening at all?
So I had been introduced to people that were the right people to have around me in that circumstance. So I had something of an idea, but it's almost like, before you have sex, you can sort of have that conception of what it is biologically, but the way that it feels is not something that you've conceived of. It's like thinking of a new color. And so that was for me what it was. In the physical body, it was just like a sensation or a state of consciousness that I could not have told you about or could not have even understood before that. So something that was just fundamentally very different than I'd experienced. And I had an inkling that, it was something that people had been talking about around me. So at the time, my employers were both advocates of psychedelic use and exploration. And, we're trying to run a very open and conscious business. So when I told them what was happening, they both thought it was like lovely more than they were alarmed.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. But the experience itself was actually it was sort of brought about by a meditation that I did with very spontaneously and actually via Skype, so via the exact platform that we're using,
Hmm.
uh, with a person I hadn't spoken to in a number of years. And it turns out that in the time between our conversations, he had received a meditation through, at the temple at Teotihuacan by
Really?
a disciple of Don Miguel Ruiz's. And so this meditation was passed from him to me, and it literally happened like right there then as we were doing the meditation. Like we were both there, and it was just like, wow, this is happening. And so he was also there to provide sort of a, yeah, that's working. This is going the way it should be going.
Well, that's good. But you did have some pain and stuff with it, right?
Yeah, it was a super visceral experience, and you described it pretty well. I mean, it's not necessarily comfortable, and it's physically very intense. A lot of like pressures and the feeling that you've got something on top of your head, right? You
Mm,
can feel this very intense sensation sort of around the crown that can be, I don't know, overwhelming in the sense that like a headache is overwhelming.
right, right.
It just affects your life, it affects your physical every day.
Yeah, yeah, especially if you don't know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you don't know what's going on.
But it sounds like you were surrounded by people who maybe didn't make it seem so bizarre to you.
Yeah, they totally didn't. I mean, it wasn't something that I felt comfortable speaking to everyone about.
Right.
Um, but actually, in the span of a year, and thanks to the culture of Los Angeles, I've been a lot more comfortable just really sharing the experience because I feel like it's something that is inherent to being a human being and that everyone can experience it, and whether the time is right or whether they're in the space mentally or emotionally to be there is one thing. But when you are, like, wow, it's such a wonderful thing to meet someone like the people around me who can kind of guide you through that experience. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've been that person to other people.
Yes, and not only that, but it's when you say everyone, it's available to everyone. It really is. It's a energy force that is supposedly asleep in most people, but you can wake it up via meditation, or it can just wake up on its own. And it sounds like you had a little of both in there.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was something, actually that now it's come to be so in my everyday life. I now work at a meditation studio, and when you're at a meditation studio, especially on the west side of Los Angeles, a Kundalini awakening is something that you can speak about in like you know, all over the studio with any of the clients. It's something that they're dealing with on a regular basis. Reiki is in the vocabulary,
Hmm.
energy work. And the idea of working with your own energy is just, it's, it's everyday material. And the fact that that's happening anywhere to me is a sign of like, of exciting progress, and the lack of discrimination against this kind of thinking.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you try to talk to people about energy, and they look at you like you're speaking another language.
Yeah. And I really, I'm from Dallas. I'm from actually an hour north of Dallas is where I grew up. And I can tell you that it's different there than it is where I am here.
I'm sure.
And it's not something, that I would have felt comfortable speaking about. I actually found meditation uh, just over 10 years ago in high school. I joined a yoga studio. My dad is an athletic guy, and he was like, if you're not doing sports, you got to do something. And I was like, what about yoga? And he said, that's so I did yoga, and I found in Shavasana just a bliss or a peace that was something unlike sleeping, unlike resting, unlike waking, and didn't really explore it further than yoga, but definitely got into meditation that way.
Now, when you do meditation now, do you do specifically Kundalini meditation or just different types of meditation?
Um, my personal philosophy is that you cannot extricate the energy centers, the seven centers in the body, from meditation at all. That it's just not possible. And when you're working with crystals, or if you're working with Reiki, or if you're working, whatever you're doing, you're using the energy in those centers. And people are releasing things, whether it's holotropic breath work or hypnosis. I mean, the meridian of the body, there's a lot of activity that you can't really extricate, I think, from meditation itself. So I think, especially in a group practice, you can feel energy in a very visceral way too. So I think that the chakra system, the Kundalini system, is something that a lot of people will experience in meditation, when they succeed in quieting their mind, but that they can feel maybe even though they're not aware of what it is.
Now, when you started having some of the pains in some of your chakras, what did you do to try and relieve it?
I have done most of my work really intuitively. And it was that resolution that I mentioned to you, I think, before the show, about addressing every single thought that came into my mind that really started that for me. And so a lot of my practices, in order to clear these centers or to activate these centers, has just been like, what comes into my mind. The first really, really, really powerful experience that I had consciously, with the energy after the first activation was with a stone. And I wasn't a collector or an enthusiast of gemstones at the time, but I had purchased one quartz wand, double terminated, because it looked nice and I wanted to have it in my room. And I thought of it while in meditation. And so I addressed it and I went and I got it, kind of like, what should I do with this? And fast forward 15 minutes, and I'm like sobbing and I am ordering a lot of old pain and old guilt, shame out of my heart center, and then stuff out of my throat center specifically. And I had the most physical experience that resulted in literally what felt like a large bruise going from my throat
Hmm.
to the center of my chest for about a week. But it meant a lot to me. And I mean, it catalyzed a lot of healing there, specifically around um, relationships or pain I had around relationships or interactions, that heart center. And then with the throat center, asking for forgiveness or making amends. I kind of followed it through. What's the source of this pain here? And when I could find sources, those original thought forms, to go and address the situation and to be able to make amends really helped me alleviate that pain.
And that's sometimes the trick. I mean, we have things going on in our head, but it's not the thing that's actually causing us the issue. There's something deeper and underlying that has to be addressed.
Yeah, very
Um,
much. I agree with that.
have you had any other paranormal type experiences outside of the energy?
I mean, almost innumerable. That's going to sound like very large, in a very forward answer. But synchronicity has become something that's just present in my everyday life.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes there will be things that are like super out of the ordinary. I was able to visualize someone's brother who'd passed away, and she had been looking for a sign from this brother. I didn't really realize, but I went up to her and just let her know that, like, I think that I had had a vision of what was her brother. I described him, and she burst out into tears because I was very accurate in what we were speaking about. And she had asked for this guidance or for this sign from him, and down to like dream work as well, being in dreams where I've had conversations or gotten information
Mm,
that turns out to be true, but is something I shouldn't know about,
right.
or something that's just, absolutely information I could not have gotten by myself. And so these things happen on like a daily basis. And I think that it comes down to, though, just a sense of knowing when you get that inner voice, when it's kind of quiet enough to really hear uh, things that come for you, to get all the chaotic thoughts that sort of bombard us these days with the news and all the social media, the comparison and that kind of stuff. When we can quiet that down, we can really get to to ourselves, to listen to that inner guidance.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the key there is getting the ego out of the way because the ego is a quite a loud voice, and it's very hard to. It's very sneaky and it's very loud.
Yeah, yeah. I really like. Have you read any Alice Bailey? Do you like Alice Bailey?
Not familiar.
She is this writer from the 1920s. She was associated with the Theosophists, and she did a lot of work at the same time as like the Golden Dawn and those guys were.
Mm-hmm.
So she has a number of books, and they're really, really on the esoteric side. But one of the things that I like that she addresses is this idea that the three lower energy centers, the root, the sacral, and the ego, right? The sacral center right here, the third chakra.
Right.
That those three, when someone is really becoming an aspirant, when they're really walking on the path and they want to live a life that has some occult leaning to it, that they take the energy from those three centers and they throw it upwards to the four, to the heart center, the throat center, the third eye, and the crown. And that those bottom three centers are really just essential to humanity, right? The rootedness, the essential humanness, and then those really deep emotions that are like, our animal selves.
Yeah.
And the ego is part of that, And so it's when you can throw the energy of the ego upwards into heart-centered activities or things of the mind, that's what the intention is, the evolution. I kind of have always liked that. I've always liked that idea.
Yeah, no, that definitely it's a good way of summing it up, I think.
And how about your experience with that third center? Is it something that, you find that you have to clear at all, or that, informs your other centers in a consequential way?
See, I don't do the energy clearing exactly. I usually try to just move the entire energy up and down.
Yeah.
So I don't try to clear things out. I've cleared it out on other people. I mean, there have been people who were dealing with a lot of, pain in different chakras, and just by touching it, I could get information. And that the first time that happened, that freaked me out because my head was just filled with stuff I couldn't have known.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful experience. I read about that in Anatomy of the Spirit. Carolyn, I think, Mann is her last name, Dr. Mann. I'm just now reading that book, and she describes something very similar to what you're talking about. Do you get that all the time? Is that something that you can turn on?
It's only happened with certain people, and it's people who are obviously going through massive Kundalini issues and usually have no idea what's happening to them.
Sure. Have you noticed a pattern at all, or is it something that just?
No, not really. I've also noticed that I don't know if it's the same with you. Your energy seems a little more balanced than mine used to be, because mine was obviously way off balance, and I had no idea what I was doing. But my energy seems to either affect people very positively or sometimes very negatively.
Polarity.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I think at this point, I think it has something to do with frequency. Like energy is always at a different frequency, so there are some people who connect better and others who don't.
Yeah, I mean, from what you know about being at a low frequency, right? When you're in a really low vibration, when you come across one of those people that's on cloud nine vibrating high, it's like nails on a chalkboard. It can get crazy.
Well, I think even beyond that, I think it's just that, even if you are more open to this stuff, some people connect better than others.
Yeah. I think inherently we all can, and there's a can't or a won't. And I'm increasingly coming to find that a lot of people, it's really can't. I used to think it was won't, but I really think it's can't, in the place that they're at until they kind of move past, like you said, some massive Kundalini issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And it may not be Kundalini exactly that they have to deal with. I think that's just one of many forms that this stuff can clear itself out in.
Well, and I think a lot of what is reflected in the centers is itself, the mental body also affects the physical body. So if you've got something, an issue or a trauma that you're activating all the time, it can affect your physical health in a really real way. And I think, Dr. Bruce Lipton, if you've also read him, is a great one. He was at Stanford for a number of years, and he talks about, he's kind of the father of epigenetics, that study.
Okay.
Literally, your thoughts and the content of your mind and what you believe about your health can really affect your health itself.
Absolutely.
And it's fascinating, and to think that our thoughts really can become manifest in our physical bodies. It's a responsibility to ourselves.
And I think even people who have a more materialistic bend will, are starting to come around to the idea that, yeah, positive and negative thinking does have an effect on the body. They may simplify it down and say it's just matters of stress and stuff, but
Sure.
at least that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, even just admitting, and meditation, uh, people can debate its efficacy and whether or not it should be prescribed for people to do. But at a very base, fundamental level, it just lowers cortisol levels, it lowers blood pressure.
Yeah.
In a physical sense, quieting the mind is just good, and we
Yes.
already know that. We have plenty of physical evidence and medical evidence that backs that up.
And as I've said before, when my experiences started happening, it was based around chakras, and I didn't know what chakras were. I had never heard of chakras. I had no idea what any of that stuff was. So it was very interesting to me to find that the energy actually centered on spots that had been predefined by other people that I didn't know existed.
Yeah, and I was in the same place. I think it all exists though before language, before the word chakra, right? That's just a label we put on it to
Sure, sure.
describe it. But it's this really fundamental sort of system within our own bodies that, yeah, like you said, no one really tells you about when you're a little kid. No one's like, hey, watch out for this, unless they're living a completely different experience than you and I in the United States, of which there are a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. If you're, raised in with a more Eastern mystic sort of upbringing, obviously this stuff is second nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's to me, that's such a wild thing that we're here in the States. And I think often we have this idea that the human experience or the normal human experience is this very narrow set of things that we experience here. And
Yeah.
there's such a vast normal, right? In life.
Oh, absolutely. And what is I don't think there is a normal, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the gamut of what one can experience, the type of childhood, the type of growing up one can have is just it's incredibly large. It's amazing.
And the after effects you see from how you're raised and stuff is so
Yeah,
it's so important that kids be raised with good energy and with just good environments in general.
very much, very much. And I know I'm going to sound like a silly person quoting another study, but my absolute favorite study of all time was one done at Emory about the heritability of pain through trauma. And
Mm,
what they found in a study of mice that they sort of, in a Pavlovian way, conditioned to fear a scent, the scent of sandalwood, or to have a panic response to.
right.
And those mice had kids, and those kids all had that same response to sandalwood without that same trauma. And some of the effects they found lasting until the fifth generation, which
Yep.
is crazy to think that we can be carrying around something that isn't even ours, and not even know it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And how exactly is it transferred? Because I don't think they could exactly say.
yeah, I think that's still the jury's still out on that. I think that what I mentioned earlier about Dr. Lipton epigenetics, if I had to guess, I would go there.
Hmm.
I would go
All
there.
right.
The idea that environmental factors can turn or something within your genes on and off, right? Just because you have the breast cancer gene doesn't mean you get it. But
Right.
what you do in your environment, especially if you have that gene, can really affect that or impact that.
And especially if you believe you're going to get it.
Yes, totally, totally. And friends and I were just having this discussion. If you believe something about yourself or don't believe something about yourself, that's really material in you being anything. If you want to be something, you have to believe that you can, or if
Yeah.
you do something, you have to believe you can.
And I remember Whitley Strieber posting on his site Unknown Country at some point about I think they were housekeepers, and half the housekeepers were told the work they were doing should result in weight loss, and the other was told that it wouldn't. And the ones who were told it would result in weight loss lost a little bit of weight.
hmm The mind is a powerful thing, man, and human attention is powerful too. I think another thing about living in the technological age is sometimes we forget that because there are so many things pulling on our attention. It's always in a million directions.
Yeah, yeah. And as great as some of the technology is, it's definitely disconnecting us from certain things.
I think it's a tool. We can use, for example, social media however you want. You can design your feed. You can only allow the things you want there. And you can use it to have whatever conversations you want. I mean, for me, I use it kind of like I was mentioning earlier, I use it to make amends. It's the best thing for finding people that you've wronged in the past. You can just search up anyone's name and find them and then apologize. It's amazing. It gives you closure that just wasn't possible, you know?
What kind of reaction do you get when you do that?
It's been universally positive. If what I say, and I endeavor it to be, is heartfelt and completely truthful, and I'm being honest with both myself and them, and owning the things that I could have done better or could ask forgiveness for. I mean, it's a hard thing to respond negatively to, I think, if someone's speaking like that to you in a heartfelt and honest way.
No, it depends how much they hold against you.
This is true. And I mean, forgiveness is not something that you can expect. It's just something that you can ask for.
Yeah, yeah. I had been talking to someone earlier tonight on Facebook who had some Kundalini experiences, and he was telling me a little bit of some of the stuff that just happened to him recently and some of the stuff he's trying to work through. And he had said, at some point, he thanked me for being someone who would listen to him and not think he was crazy. And
Oh, wow.
it's really unfortunate that really is the case. I mean, you can't, for the most part, go out and just talk to people about this stuff.
You know, I totally agree with you, but I think I might be the only person in the world that really does try to do that. I it's one of the advantages about being like a relatively smiley, small female. You really get licensed to just do a lot more things like that. And, I want to ask you a question too. So I've
Yeah.
been finding that the more and more I have been working with my own system with my energy centers, I've also started seeing corresponding color or activation. So as I've seen people activated, in a certain center, I will see the color in a visual way around their center.
That I don't get.
Okay. Yeah, it started on my cat, believe it or not. I was petting the cat and I just started to see this real visual color. And I have to say that was arresting. And it was also something that bothered me even more than the initial awakening itself. It was,
Really?
wow, I'm seeing something with my eye. This is reality. I'm not, and now I just see colors. But
So then you start questioning your sanity.
sure, sure. But, I wanted to see a pattern. And it was like, okay, what is this? Is there a pattern? Get my eyes checked. Are they good? Cool. Get a checkup. Am I good? Cool. And I actually asked my doctor. I brought this up to my doctor, which I don't recommend, actually. Don't, unless your doctor is holistic or something. Because my doctor,
Right.
really was not into having that conversation. But it's something that now I found a great pattern in, and it's wonderful because one of the things that I can sense now, and I wonder if any of your listeners perhaps also have had this experience of visualizing these colors. Uh, if I see someone activated around the crown, if they've got a lot of purple, a lot of violet going on around the top of their head, I automatically know we can have a spiritual conversation because I know what that means. It's like, got it. Cool. Let's have a chat. And I've tested it at really weird times. It's usually worked. Or I mean, it hasn't not worked. It's been good.
Huh.
I mean, like high synchronicity. It's been super fun to experience.
See, for me, I feel things rather than see them. I mean, and I always doubt that, but it almost always pans out.
And it's your first impression too. It's never the revised.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. And even some psychic premonitions I had as I've been working on my book, I noticed like the first thing I wrote down about what I was sensing was the most accurate, and the more I revised it and tried to kind of dig into it, the more inaccurate it became.
I've been taught lessons on a few occasions about listening to myself first. Then I don't listen to it. So the universe is like, you were right in the beginning. Stop that.
Stop trying to make something else out of it.
Yes, don't impose your will because your will is far less awesome than what is actually out there for you.
And it may very well be your true will when it comes down to it.
This is true. This is true. And I think when things are in alignment or when they're, supposed to come in, they'll come in whether you want them to or not, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'll either choose to grow or you'll be forced.
And there's been and again earlier today when I was talking to this person, something that comes up a lot is whether I think this is a like lifelong thing or it's leading to a specific point. And I think this is a lifelong thing. Once you wake it up and you pursue it, it's not like there's an end point.
Yeah. I was speaking to someone today. I had a friend over rather unexpectedly, and she's been going through two things at the same time. One of them is a depression and one of them is an awakening. And so, I happened to have the morning off and it was really lovely. But we were talking about this activation and that uh, well, where were we just at? I lost my place, the original point. You
The whether this is just a path or has an end point, or like it's a lifelong thing or has an end point.
Yeah, we described it as like a bomb, that once you lit the fuse, it didn't really matter what you were wanting to do after that. Once it was lit, that there was just no stopping it. There was an inevitability to a lot of this path.
And I think you can fight it, but
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's when you end up getting sick.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And you hear a lot about shamanic illnesses, right? About healers going through some period of real physical illness,
Oh yeah.
or spiritual illness before they then come into their path, which turns out to be spiritual.
I've been very pleased with the number of people who have commented or contacted me because of the show I did on Kundalini. Um, because it shows me that there are a lot of people out there who are having these type of experiences and just don't know what to do with them or who to talk to about them.
And Soraya, let me tell you, being here in LA, I work at a meditation studio right now that has hundreds of members and literally thousands upon thousands of visits per month. And almost all the people that are there are very much walking the path that we're talking about. And they're mostly like clinical hypnotherapists, Reiki healers. They've got this training. I mean, mindfulness training through even like systems like UCLA. UCLA has a mindfulness research center, and one of the instructors there is an instructor for us. So it's like there are tons and tons of people who are being awakened, even in a group setting, like in a real. I see it happen all the time. And it's the most inspiring thing to be able to be the conduit between, people, the general public, and real meditation. That's just available drop in, for $125 a month. But still, regardless, it's like you can come in somewhere and someone can instruct you on these things. We have crystal energy meditation. People can learn to use stones to activate their centers, with
Now,
a master at the front. It's amazing.
do you think the stones themselves have anything to do with it, or do you think they're a focal point?
It's really interesting. I'm someone who's very, very connected to stones. And I also associate my initial awakening or my openness to it or my, being primed for it with sort of the fact that I had been wearing a Moldavite ring. And if any of your listeners are into gemstones, Moldavite is tied up in the legend of the Holy Grail. And I didn't know any of that. It's known as like literally the alchemist's stone. It is the stone of awakening, of immortality and transformation, transmutation. And so anyway, I was wearing the stone in a ring on my left hand, which is generally receiving. And I had no idea what it was. But, the guy who wrote the book of stone, Robert Simmons, he was awakened by a Moldavite. Like he literally writes that in his book. And it's like the most widely distributed book on stones that I know of, at least. But anyway,
Huh.
I consider them real allies, but I see them in the same way that a lot of people see plant medicine. I just see it as crystal medicine. Each stone has its own structure, its own crystalline structure, and going back to your vibration or your frequency, they operate at a different frequency associated with, you guessed it, some of the centers. And depending on the structure of the stone, it operates in different centers. And for me, they've been real aids. I was only interested in them because I had an experience with them. So, it was like the experience and then investigation.
Right, right. And I think too, living where you are, you have a lot more openness with the community than a lot of other places would too. So
Yes,
I think when people are looking for someone to talk to and they don't know what's happening to them, they don't necessarily have that option.
yes.
And and for some people, $125 a month is a lot of money too.
Absolutely. I do want to say though that, like, at least for meditation, they've been growing in applications, like on apps, mobile apps, by leaps and bounds. There's some amazing apps to use if you want to get
Hmm.
into meditation and you don't exactly know where to go. And the fact that you can get this on the Apple Store, for whatever dollars, it it makes it feel like accessible, or it makes it feel like it's familiar. We're used to that platform. We can receive that stuff that way. And it doesn't feel weird. It feels like something that, it could be a very personal practice, like everything else in your phone. Nobody really goes in there.
Well, not only that, but when you're using it on a piece of technology that you're very connected to, it kind of makes it more okay.
Absolutely. Especially for the generation directly below me, where this has been since they can remember. The internet was in the sky, and we had it
Yeah.
personal computers in our pockets.
um. Oh, I was going to say something. Oh, yep, it's gone. It was there for a moment, and now it's gone. Now you said you were like a very different person before all this started.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the person that I am right now is someone that I've always been and that I had a very strong relationship with. I think that there was a process of me going astray, and it was the loop of like materialism and vanity specifically. I was really
Mm.
into stuff. I was around a lot of people with a lot of stuff. I ended up going to Southern Methodist University, where my dad teaches in Dallas, and it's nicknamed at times Southern Millionaire University, and not for no reason. I mean, it's really obscene, or not obscene. It's just almost hard to fathom the amount of money going through that school.
Mm.
There's Lamborghinis on campus every year. Yeah. But pledgeship dues it's thousands of dollars to be in a fraternity or sorority per semester.
Wow.
Ridiculous. So anyway, I was around a lot of this stuff, and I had never really had that. My family isn't that. Um,
Hmm.
I went there because my tuition was free, and I graduated high school in 2008. So then made a lot of sense. But I really I sort of agreed to that, or I agreed to that paradigm. So I found myself putting a lot of my attention and my energy towards acquiring things, to make me feel like I was worthy, or that, I was equal or equivalent to these people. And it was something that really threw me off track for a while. And I guess you could call it like escaping karma, or like a dharmic lesson. But I had the opportunity to be with someone forever, a very nice person whose family had, an incredible means that would have made me comfortable and safe whatever my whole life, or never needed anything. But I kind of woke up one day and I just had this sudden realization that everything was wrong, and that what I was doing just felt not at all like, I felt like I was in the wrong body. I felt like I was in the wrong place. Like, who is this person? And so I picked up all of my shit and I moved to LA. And that's what I
Hmm.
and that's where everything started.
Wow.
Took out the extensions, took off the nails, stopped the tanning. Just like, what am I doing? Who is this? You know? Or why would one person even want to cover their real body with things that aren't? Like, why would you want fake hair? Why would you want other nails? What is even the motivator? What does that say about you? About what
Hmm.
where you find your value, or your statement about where you find your value. So there was all this internal evaluation. But it was moving to Los Angeles and becoming a part of a lot of these communities that are involved in meditation, or that are really open to the idea of energy. And it was being around those people, that made me sort of realize that, one, I had been into that for a very long time, and I had suppressed it myself in an effort to conform. But
Mm.
two,
Yeah.
that if all of these people were also experiencing these things, that there must be something fundamental or elemental to it. And man, I want to know what that is.
Hmm. I know what I was going to say. I've also used binaural beats more recently to try and just do slight meditation on consciousness work, and it definitely has an interesting effect.
Tell me about it. I've not done that myself.
It's a different tone in each ear. So you put a pair of headphones on. You can find a bunch of them online. Some work way better than others. But
Mm,
what they do is they change the synchronization of your brain because you're getting two different tones in each ear,
yeah,
and they're set in such a way that you hear it kind of in the middle of your head,
yeah,
and it's a different tone than you're hearing in either ear.
yes. That's really cool. That's
And so
cool.
some of them I've done and gotten no responses at all. Others I've had just really weird visualizations. The weirdest one was I had a guy, all of a sudden the face of this guy was smoking a cigar was right in front of me.
Wow.
And I was just like, "Well, that's weird. Get out of my whatever you're in because I can't not picture you now."
Yeah, I mean that's a visual for you. I wonder what the binaural beat was trying to tell you with that one.
I have no idea. And but some of the better ones, I mean, not that that was a bad one. That
Sure.
was just not something where I was like, "Ooh, that was cool." It was just like that was weird.
Yeah.
Um, but other ones have made me feel like I was going over the edge of a cliff and there was a huge vista opening up below me.
Wow.
And these are not sensations I would normally get from meditation. So it was definitely something with the the binaural beat thing that was affecting what my brain was doing and feeling.
How interesting. You know something I noticed? You're reminding me of it. One of my favorite songs is Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel. And
Hmm.
I know that Peter himself, especially if you listen to his music, go back and listen to it, is really on this path as well. And a lot of his lyrics indicate that, especially his newer music. But I've always noticed that his music plays differently on both sides. That when you play it in headphones, that it's a different experience. And it kind of felt like you said, like I was experiencing two different sounds in right and left ear, but in the middle of my head, it was one thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd be curious if you get that or any of your listeners when they listen to
Hmm.
Salisbury Hill.
Okay.
Well, there might be
Um,
musical artists that
huh?
employ that too. I wonder how
What
many
was
artists today are actually using that kind of technology in their music.
I'm sure they are.
I
Plus, there's also frequencies we respond to, and I know musicians have played around with that before.
very much, and they do it in movies as well.
Yes. They do it more obviously in movies. Like you can pick it up when they're doing it in movies a lot of times.
Yeah, yeah, you can. And the strange thing, I mean, me now being out here in Los Angeles, I'm realizing that it's a lot more ubiquitous in the content that we consume than we even think. Like there are a lot more magicians on both sides who have input into the content. Like it's mass marketed. It's
Yes.
crazy. It's crazy.
It's almost a little frightening how well some of these companies and corporations know how to influence us. I mean, like the science and the art behind influencing people to do what you want is almost frightening at this point.
Very much. And my little nerd side again, the father of modern advertising is Freud's nephew, man. Eddie Bernays.
Really?
Yeah, Edward Bernays. He was a propagandist both for the government and also for big business. He was the person that invented the celebrity spokesperson, the idea of that, uh,
Hmm.
and a number of other things. But I mean, he used it in war propaganda and in advertising, and his thinking forms the basis for a lot of what's done today. And his thinking is based or informed on his uncle's work. So it was like insider job. And I think,
But they've
go ahead.
oh, I was going to say they've gotten so much better at it though.
Oh, extrapolating off from there, right? And if you figure, if you had the knowledge that you do have, but not the purity of your intent, you could do some things with what
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
All right.
or be of some influence.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, most of the things we're tried to be influenced into is make giving, rich people money.
This is very true, and I find that the separation increasingly between those who have and those who have not in this country to be probably the most troubling development of our time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it doesn't look like it's getting better anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it creates this weird like dichotomy almost from birth. You have to like identify with having or not having. Not have to, but you do identify with one of those two things instead of just, I remember in the 90s as a kid just feeling like everyone was generally fine.
Yeah.
Like it was just all good. And I know I was a kid, so there's that, filter. But knowing that there will be more people that identify themselves as not having, seeing lack or looking for it from a very young age, I think can be incredibly detrimental to the psyche. And even just having a mother with a lack mindset, that's you see what's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, we still define ourselves by possessions and things like that. So, people will spend money on stupid things that they don't need rather than putting their money toward the stuff they do.
You know what? As a millennial, I feel like we feel that a lot because we are the generation that's now largest by size, but we have by far the least in terms of purchasing power. So by society's definition of success, right? Property, procreation, assets, we are failing. We have no kids, we have no houses. Most of us don't even have a car. We we either have to find another way to define success for ourselves or really just be miserable.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. But it's still being defined for everyone
Yeah.
from the media, from everything you watch as you need this stuff.
Yeah, but here's the thing is that I think we want to be so comfortable, and sometimes thinking is uncomfortable and sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. So I feel like we've got to step up and put on our big boy pants and get uncomfortable as a society.
That's good. That's a good suggestion, actually.
If we're going to get anything done, it's like, the fundamental thing in meditation. And I think even Freud goes into this when he talks about interpreting your own dreams. You cannot attach a bunch of negative thoughts and feelings or beat yourself up about realizations about yourself. So if you're thinking about a negative aspect of yourself, a weakness or something you want to make better, you got to stop beating yourself or else you'll never be able to look at it or deal with it
Yeah.
or improve it.
Or let go of it.
Yes, exactly. You've got to have some measure of space, allowance of what is, and just, general self-compassion. Just be gentle with yourself and other people, or else we can never, like you said, really let go or go through any catharsis. We're not seeing any great examples, to be fair, in the media at this point, but I feel it's a whole lot more about the concentric circles of influence, the people who are close to you, who you can reach out and touch today, tomorrow, your family, your friends. How are you showing up there?
Hmm. Now, why don't you give people your website?
Sure. My website is just my name. It's www.rachelarfox.com. And we have not gotten into pretty much anything that I do, but I do a lot of stuff. If you're interested in meditation, intention, mindfulness, those are primarily my areas. I will be also leading a retreat this August and September, a couple of retreats, and I would be thrilled to have anyone's eyes or ears on our project.
Okay, what do you do with the retreats?
So I host retreats through an organization called Journey. Their website's www.wejourney.co. And they essentially do a mashup of a really experiential service project in a developing country. Like think, working in areas without infrastructure, no water, no power, no sewer, and doing something of an infrastructure project, whether it's at a school or whether it's, emergency housing units, clean water, whatever it may be, doing that impact project for the first portion of the retreat, and then combining that with an integration of meditation and yoga and generally, 50 other people who just did that with you, which is going to be an experience in and of itself.
Well, Well, that seems like it could affect some people pretty strongly.
And that's what I spent April 2016 to December 2016 doing like constantly, was facilitating that. And that's actually how I became a meditation instructor itself. As I started teaching when the first student said, "Hey, can you meditate with me?"
Nice. Now you had sent me a file of your meditation. Is that available for people?
Yeah, that's on my SoundCloud. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and change the homepage on my Instagram. It's at Rachel R. Fox to that link. And I can also send it to you as well.
Okay. All right. Because that was, if I remember right, a 15-minute guided meditation,
Yeah,
right?
it's just a guided activation of all of your centers, kind of an introduction and a general clearing or cleansing.
All right. Excellent. Is there anything else you want to mention before we're done?
Um, no, just that it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. And I am so excited that you are continuing to have these conversations and generally connecting your listeners all across the world with all kinds of ideas and new people. And I applaud you for that work. And thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Hopefully, it will aid other people who are looking for answers.
And I mean this sincerely. If anybody has any questions, I am so open to people messaging me on Facebook or by email. I would love to be of use in any way that I could be.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you, Soraya. It's been a pleasure.